Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today we have a rule set. We know what the VGC rules are going to be for the start of the VGC 2023 season, and to everyone's surprise, it is different from the anticipated rule set that we had all expected it to be, and we had implemented on Pokemon Showdown, and instead they have announced that they are banning all of the Paradox Pokemon, all of the Calamity Pokemon, for at least the first 2 months of VGC 2023. So some really, really exciting news. Thankfully, I had the foresight to not upload any videos about the format and wait for the announcement, unlike some content creators. And certainly it wasn't just because I'm very lazy. But I do have a roundtable today to talk about the implications of the new rules. And so I'm joined by a bunch of top players. So, not all don't all go at once, but what are your first reactions to this new format?
I guess I'll start. I think that it's really cool to keep formats fresh, and that playing a whole year of the same format gets stale. And I just love rotating series, and love that they've brought this back from Gen 8. Like, I thought that was one of the best changes they made in Gen 8, so it's cool to see it stick around.
I think one of my big initial takeaways, at least like just going into how games are played, is like two big offensive cores just like went away. Like Genpal Dragonite on the physical side, gone. Chi-Yu Fluttermane on the special side, gone. Format's a lot bulkier right now.
Um, the format reminds me of 2014 right now. Lots of strong mons that are pretty fat that do a lot of damage that are next to some of the best redirectors in the game.
Yeah, absolutely. You know 2014 better than anyone here, but I think especially that format was dominated by Amoonguss, and the premature format that we had was also very, very Amoonguss centered. Except we also had Pokemon like Chi-Yu and Chen Pao that are really powerful offensive Pokemon that just OHKO it. And now we don't have those anymore. So I think that this is going to be an even more Amoonguss focused format than we had anticipated.
Yeah, I feel like it was easy to get lost in the new format just since there was so many new offensive threats running around, and you also had to like learn how to use terastallizing. So this is like this. It feels like we're gonna have like training wheels format for terraing, right? The power level is going to be significantly lower. Using like your Terra to your advantage is going to be more important than just leading your Calamity and just lowering your opponent's defenses and just clicking buttons. I was a little disappointed by it because some of the new mods are like really fun, but they'll be allowed eventually. So like it's fine. I'm looking forward to it.
Right, and just to clarify, this format is announced to be all the way through, I believe, January 31st. So that includes regionals like San Diego regionals in North America and Liverpool regionals in UK. However, we don't know what the format is going to be for Orlando regionals starting in February. So we might see these Pokemon allowed, we might not. We really don't know. Hopefully, they will announce it a little bit ahead of time, so we have some time to prepare. But it's definitely going to be interesting to see when they start releasing these new Pokemon, whether they release the new Paradox Pokemon first or the Calamity Pokemon first, or they just release them all at once. I'm excited to see. I thought that at least at the start of Sword and Shield, the slow introduction of these game-changing Pokemon, including G-Max Pokemon as well as Pokemon like Incineroar and Venusaur and Clefairy, that hadn't been in the decks earlier. That the type of shakeup every so often was really exciting. Like Nick said, I think that some of the more forced format shifts didn't feel nearly as fun, but the slow growth of the early 2020 format, especially as we were learning how to use Dynamax and now learning how to use terastallization, is going to be a really, really interesting way to approach VGC.
Yeah, on the note of forced format shifts, I wasn't a fan of like swapping back and forth between formats, like series series 5 to, or no, it was series 7 to series 8, and then series 9 was just series 7 v2 with no changes from series 7. With like those types of shifts were um, not ideal, but more generally, like, yeah, already
Mhm.
mentioned that I'm a fan of it, so yeah.
Yeah, and so jumping into, I guess, the actual metagame that we're expecting to see, uh, what are some Pokemon that you guys expect that will really be power players in this metagame? I guess I'll start with Amoonguss. I think Amoonguss is probably public enemy number one, just because we lost two of the best ways to KO it, and there is no Misty Terrain, there is no Electric Terrain other than Pincurchin to really slow it down from clicking Spore a lot. So this is obviously, I think, the number one threat. What are some other Pokemon that you guys think are going to be common?
Um, if I may, I think the first thought we lost Fluttermane, which is like the premier fast special ghost attacker. So I think that Dragapult will, special Dragapult in particular, will like find its niche in just a very fast Pokemon that can start hitting everything pretty strongly with Draco Meteors and Shadow Balls.
Absolutely. One thing I will note is that Dragapult, I think, had a niche in the previous format because it was faster than Fluttermane. Now there is nothing that really approaches that 142 speed stat or the 135 speed stat that Fluttermane had off the top of my head. And so, in, on the other hand, that also means that maybe it doesn't have to run max speed. Maybe it gets to run a modest nature or even a lot more bulk and really only outspeed the bare minimum threats that we're going to see, which is we also lost stuff like Roaring Moon. That was also naturally really fast. So the format's going to be a lot slower, and Dragonpult is probably going to be the fastest thing possible, and meaning it's going to be this really hard hitting, bulky threat. I guess adding to that, the other Pokemon I do want to emphasize as well. Dragonite was a really powerful Pokemon with extreme speed and Terra Normal in the previous format, and I think obviously it doesn't have Chien-Pao to boost its damage anymore. I still think that Terra Normal Dragonite with Extreme Speed is going to be really, really good, just as a cleanup Pokemon, especially since it doesn't have to Terra Normal. It still has really powerful Dragon moves, Flying moves, and it still has Inner Focus or Multiscale, both really, really good abilities that allow it to hit really hard.
So, we were mentioning that the power level of the format is dropping, and one Pokemon that I was really excited to use, but found itself somewhat limited by the power level of the past format that I think might uh, get its chance to truly shine in this format is Gothitelle. Um, it it didn't love getting just taking heavy damage from the high damage cores that are legal in the Battle Spot Double series that we were toying with, but without all of the scary threats, it's going to be able to trap more Pokemon that are just uh, closer to it in stats. And yeah, Shadow Tag is probably going to be spooky.
Right. I mean, we talked about Fluttermane being one of the premier offensive threats. Fluttermane, of course, is a ghost type, so not only does it threaten Gothitelle super effectively, but it also can switch out of the Shadow tag. And then similarly, all of the Calamity forms are dark types, which means that they could also threaten Gothitelle really easily. So Gothitelle is definitely going to be very happy to see those Pokemon go. And of course, Fake Out added to his move pool in the previous generation is something that we haven't really seen in a format where your opponent doesn't have the ability to just Dynamax and ignore Fake Out altogether. So this could definitely be a really premier threat. I know people were talking about running Perish Trap earlier. Of course, that is no longer as viable with the Screamtail also being no longer the format as another Paradox Pokemon. But I'm excited to see how people can try to abuse Gothitelle early on in this format.
I think I don't know if it's going to be good, but now that Pokemon Killer Watchroll, it has a really high speed stat and has a good ability, or a lot of the good abilities. And then Electric Flying has always been like a really good typing in VGC, mostly with Thundurus. But I'm not sure how strong it'll be. But competitive is very interesting. We don't have a lot of competitive users, and then maybe some other Intimidate Pokemon like uh, are more viable now too
Mm-hmm.
because of the lack of power. So I mean, 125 is no joke. Like after Dragapult, 125 is really high.
Yeah, absolutely. We talked about how Pokemon like Chi-Yu are banned, and that really opens up the door for Arcanine to be the premier fire type of the format. And so, of course, having Intimidate counterplay is going to be really valuable. That being said, there is stuff like Clear Amulet that does make it a lot easier. But yeah, just one, there aren't a ton of electric types. Iron Hands is now gone. I think that it's like this. Sandy Shocks is now gone. So it's like this, Pawmot, Magnezone feel like the three electric types that maybe exist. I don't know if there's another electric type that's any good. And so we really are a Bellybolt maybe, Pachirisu, Pincurchin, Raichu. I don't know. Like you're Rotom. You're scraping the bottom of the barrel here. Rotom's pretty good. So you really are. There are a ton of electric types, and some stuff like Gyarados might come up and become a threat. And so Kilowattrel is going to be really good there. And then of course the flying typing is really good into Amoonguss, which is always going to be really valuable. And then notably, it has Tailwind and it has Wind Power. So if it clicks Tailwind, it's going to get a power boost as well if it chooses not to be competitive. If we decide that maybe Intimidate Deterrent isn't going to be the most valuable thing.
Speaking of things that A, benefit from Fluttermane being gone, and B, that have historically had success, Garchomp. The best ground type in the format historically gets a lot of usage, and I think that's probably just Garchomp without much competition now. And so you might see, like, similar to how, like, getting a Z move was big for it in 2017, because it had a single target ground move in the form of Tectonic Rage, it has that again with Ground Terra Blast, and that could be pretty big for it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, even in the existing metagame, I think putting Garchomp next to a flying type, be it Gyarados, Kilowattrel, Talonflame, Murkrow, we saw a bunch of flying types paired with Garchomp, just clicking Terra, Ground, Earthquake, along with some sort of speed control, normally Tailwinds, was really, really powerful. It had the potential to OHKO a lot of threats. I think it was especially good because it threatened both Chi-Yu and Fluttermane, one of the really common leads. And now, especially with stuff like Chen Pao that really threatened Garchomp gone, Garchomp's speed tier is even better. It is really fast with that, with 102 and 100 normally being the fast number. Being faster than that is really, really valuable with all of these calamities and Paradox Pokemon gone. And then, like you said, Terra Ground is going to be absolutely crazy for it, just allowing it to boost up its power even more. So definitely really terrified of what Garchomp is going to bring to the table. And that is 3 dragon types that are all going to be really good. So I wonder if something like Sylveon is going to see more play. We haven't really seen a lot of Sylveon in the other format, but now, yes, granted, all these dragon types do like to Terra into a different typing, but having the ability to stop these switch-ins and really do a lot of damage with Hyper Voice could be really interesting, although it still has to contend with Amoonguss being a great switch into all of its attacks.
So I would like to add one more dragon type to this list. I feel like Hydreigon is going to be really strong because there's not many fairy types anymore. So you can, in the start of the format, you can always go Specs and just have Specs Dracos. But with the Choice Specs and the Terra Dragon, and I don't think there's many things that can resist that in the format right now.
Yeah, that's true. There are not a ton of steel types anymore. We talked about how, I guess we didn't talk about, but I think a lot of the steel types are gone because some of them were also Paradox Pokemon. And, okay, actually, I guess what are the steel types remaining is a good question because, like you mentioned, there aren't a ton of fairy types either that can really switch in on Hydreigon's attacks. And we did talk about Terra Steel as an option. So like Iron Treads is gone. King Gambit's still around? Tinkaton's still around? I guess there are some steel types that are still very viable.
Goldango's there. It's
Yeah,
pretty good.
but the thing also is like Goldango, like even when it comes into switching on Hydreigon, like Goldango is not going to appreciate switching into it if it's a Dark Pulse as opposed to a Draco Meteor. Hydreigon has fire coverage for Scizor. It's a lot of even a lot of the steel types aren't going to have a good time with Hydreigon potentially. But
Right.
yeah, we are a little bit short in the steel department, I think. Sorry, let me pull the list back up again.
Yeah.
Tinkaton!
Well, does anyone want to give a quick talk about why Goldengo is going to be kind of crazy this format?
Oh yeah, it's that ability.
It is, in
This
fact.
this Pokemon is immune to status moves. You cannot spore it. And in a format where Amoonguss is probably the best Pokemon in the format, that's pretty big.
That's the main thing.
And to Make It Rain is like very strong as well. Even in like the format that we were just playtesting with, it was still doing a lot of work and has access to Nasty Plot. So since there's just a big power decrease now, big attacks like that, getting up Nasty Plots and using a spread move that has 120 base power, is going to be really strong.
Right. They just gave it Astral Barrage, basically, Steel Astral Barrage. It has a lot of different sets it can run. You mentioned Nasty Plot. It has things moves like Recover that it can run that give it a lot of staying power. It has screens that can run that. Or it can go more aggressive with things like Choice Scarf and its incredible move pool. Not only make it rain, but also things like Flash Cannon, Steel Beam, Power Gem, Shadow Ball, all sorts of psychic moves, electric moves. Like, it really does have the full gauntlet as far as moves that it can run and sets that it can run, whether you want to go fast, whether you want to go slow. And switching into Amoonguss is just going to be so valuable this format. And so I definitely think that Goldengo is going to be one of the premier threats in this format.
If you look, also Hydreigon, Goldengo, if we love talking about synergy sometimes, it gives that 2014 like Aegis / Hydreigon vibe. A little bit. I mean, they fit each other pretty well. Levitate on Hydreigon, Steel types being weak to ground, resisting Fairy, being immune to fighting. So Hydreigon and Goldengo could be a pretty good combination together to start with.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. And I guess speaking of dragon types, and speaking of Aegislash, this is the Pokemon that I think is most comparable to Aegislash. It's not Goldengo. It's actually Baxcalibur, because this thing has a crazy move called Glaive Rush that doubles the damage that it takes from attacks the next turn after it's clicked. But it's a base 120 dragon type move. It does so much damage. And also, also your opponent's moves can't miss it the next turn. So this thing does a ton of damage. It's a pseudo legendary, so it's got this base 145 attack stat. But it creates that sort of Aegislash dynamic where after it attacks, next turn it's going to be really susceptible to big damaging moves. And you have to choose whether you want to protect to avoid those, or say, my opponent isn't going to attack. They know I'm going to protect. So I'm just going to attack again and get some more big damage off. The same type of Aegislash dynamic. I am curious to see whether this is going to see play, because I think this Pokemon has a lot of stats. It's a base stat total 600 Pokemon in a format where those don't really exist other than a lot of the Pokemon that we've covered just now, Hydreigon, Garchomp, Dragapult. So I'm curious to see if this Pokemon is going to be any good. What do you all think about this?
If you build around it, you can definitely you mentioned it has a lot of stats. You can give it way more stats because of the new buff to ice types with the snowstorm.
Yeah. There's also, it's got a cool ability for a strong physical attacker because you can't burn it. And in fact, it gets +1 attack when it's hit by a fire move, and it can't be burned, which is pretty big because that's traditionally one of the biggest ways to cripple a physical attacker. You burn it. So that's why you see Will-O-Wisp Arcanine a lot in formats like 2017.
Yeah, and we've already seen Terra fire on physical attackers just to dodge Will-O-Wisp. So not having to spend your Terra on that, so you can use it offensively or use it on a different Pokemon.
Yeah, if you give it Clear Amulet, then it's immune to almost every physical debuff.
Yeah, that is really powerful. And then, especially now with, I guess it was never really too worried about. I think it's Wo-Chen is the attack dropping one, but that is the only other real physical debuff that I can think of that would affect it. Misty Terrain maybe for Glaive Rush is kind of funny.
Reflect, but
Reflect,
no,
yes, that's the important one. Does it get Psychic Fang, Brick Break? It's not going to run those anyways. Although there are some good screens users. We do have Pokemon like Grimmsnarl. Screens, I think, probably a little less good for two reasons. Because I was really enjoying Grimmsnarl in the previous format, but now, one, people are not going to lead two special attackers or two physical attackers nearly as much because there's less reason to. Previously, you see a lot of Chen Pao plus physical attacker leads or Chi Yu plus special attacker leads, and you got to click Light Screen and know that it's going to have a ton of value. Now you have to click Reflector Light Screen, and if they lead two different type of attackers, you might not get any, or you might get less value out of it, especially if Grimmsnarl gets knocked out on turn 1. And then the other reason is just in general, it is a lower power level format, and so turning OKOs into 2-hit KOs, I think, is a lot more valuable than turning a potential 2-hit KOs into 3-hit KOs, or turning 2-hit KOs into other slightly weaker 2-hit KOs. I personally think that's less value. So the screen set is going to be a little less good than it previously was. That being said, Parting Shot is just a crazy move, and Prankster Parting Shot is really powerful for Grimmsnarl. And like we said, there are a ton of dragon types. Having access to a move like Spirit Break, which is a fairy type move, is still really strong.
Also, there's less dark types now, where Parting Shot wouldn't work. because of the Ruination Pokemon not being there, like Chi-Yu or Ting-Lu. So a lot of the dark types that would have been immune to Prankster Parting Shot, they're out of the format, so you have more board positions where you can Party Shot.
Yeah. It's also, I think, one of the few good fake out mons in the formats. You might not have a slot to run it in, but it's. I'm looking at the list of what else gets fake out in this format, and there's like regular Hariyama, there's Gothitelle,
There's actually
but
a number of decent ones, I think, because we mentioned Gothitelle. There is Tinkaton, I think, is a real Pokemon. I think Pawmot is a real Pokemon. It hasn't been implemented correctly on Pokemon, or its signature move, Revival Blessing. That's not a signature move, but there's only 2 Pokemon that get it. Has not been implemented on Pokemon Showdown, so we haven't been able to test with it. But now the in-game ladder is implemented, and so we will be able to test with Pokemon like Pawmot. Hariyama is legal. I don't think Berserker is legal. Okay, there aren't actually as many as I thought there were, but having access to Grimmsnarl, Tinkaton, Gothitelle, Pawmot, maybe Raichu, Salazzle, Hariyama if you're really desperate, is actually a pretty decent variety of fake out users.
yeah, I think we're also gonna see a lot more like variety in Grimmsnarl support sets now that you basically don't have to burn half your move slots on keeping screens up.
Absolutely. It does still have, I mean, it still has a base 120 attack stat, and it has
Yeah, it has
fantastic offensive coverage.
Yeah, it has a great support toolkit.
And then I think there are 2 more Pokemon that we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about because they were all over the Pokemon Showdown ladder in the previous format, the unofficial format. And the first one, of course, is Dondozo. This, of course, paired with Tatsugiri, was everywhere, and now is only going to get better with fewer Pokemon, or potentially only going to get better with fewer threats in the format. On the other hand, I think that now that there are fewer strong Pokemon in the format, Dondozo might get targeted down a little more. You don't have to worry about Chien-Pao Dragonite leads and Chi-Yu Fluttermane leads. You just have Dondozo has gone up the list of priorities, at least for me, and so I'm maybe allowed to dedicate more Pokemon, more moves to dealing with it, and that might make it easier. I'm not really sure if this is a good thing for Dondozo because it was already such a premier threat. But what do y'all think about Dondozo in this format?
It's going to be more centralizing for sure, and whether or not that increases its chance of spiking a major, it's going to be more powerful, just like the Navekian, and so, yeah, it's got a target on its back before the format even dropped. It's very good. You have to check it, and you have to make sure that your check actually beats it. You can't. There's no soft checking Dondozo. You just kind of get rolled if you give it an inch. So, yeah.
If I may pose a question about Dondozo to people in this call who played 2017, how do you think that compares to EV teams in 2017 with Extreme Evo Boost?
Not even comparable. EV lost to soft checks. Dondozo doesn't.
EV was also required full dedication. With Dondozo, you don't necessarily have to dedicate your whole team to building around it.
Yeah, I
allowed to use
agree
it
with that
from one
count.
mode.
Yeah,
But,
it's a two. Yeah, I agreed. It's a 2-mon mode as opposed to this is your entire team.
Against EV, you could. There were lots of valid ways to deal with it. You could just snarl Arcanine and make the Espeon deal no damage. If they were Crocodile instead of Espeon, you could cycle Intimidates and neutralize it. Dondozo is way faster. I think it's more comparable to Xerneas than Eevee. I don't think it's quite as good as Xerneas because it requires 2 team slots and 2 board slots, but in terms of effect on the game state, it's quite similar. It's like original Dex Xerneas.
All right. In that case, the last Pokemon that I've seen a lot of on ladder, and I think only is going to get better, is Annihilate. This Pokemon has Defiant, which means that you can't really use your Arcanines against it or your Gyarados against it. Gyarados, especially if it wants to click Terra Flying into super effectively into the fighting type, it can't do that. It can't switch in very easily. It's got a really, really well-rounded stats, very well optimized stats because it's a physical attacker. And then its signature move is a Rage Fist, which increases its damage output every single time it gets hit. And so if you kind of chip it and don't OHKO it, it is going to start doing a lot of damage really, really quickly. So this is a Pokemon that I've seen a lot of, especially on like Scrimsnarls teams, Amoonguss teams in the past format, and now again with the reduction in power level, I suspect that this is only going to get better. And the loss of Fluttermane, I think it's only going to get better.
Yeah, for sure. Rage Fist is. I didn't quite understand how it works when I first saw it, but Rage Fist just has a counter that is a trait on the Pokemon. It's similar to like Perish turns or something like it. Not even that. It's like just something that's tracked in the game, like regardless of if you switch it out. If you transform into it, you get the Rage counter. It's just a trait about the mon, so you don't have to use Rage Fist once for it to start tracking, which was that was what I thought about it when I first saw the move. But yeah, Rage Fist, it's just really good. It builds up, and eventually you can get up to a 300 base power move, I think, is the cap.
Yep. If you get hit 5 times, you end up with a 300 base power ghost move, which is crazy strong on already high attack stat.
Something you didn't mention is that it also gets Vital Spirit, which is, in my opinion, the better ability on it, because Amoonguss is just a menace in the format, and having a Spore immunity lets you like exist while Amoonguss is in the game without spending a turn taunting it, and so yeah, really excited to see how Annihilate does. Ghost fighting coverage is also just the like it's perfect 2-move coverage. There's no type that or no type combination that is like resistant to it, with the exception of Ghost Normal. So it's cool to see.
Yeah, this Pokemon is, I think, also going to be a huge threat. And then I guess a couple other Pokemon that I didn't mention, but I guess I should mention. Armorogue, I believe, is still in the format. This was a Pokemon that people were pairing with Indeedee as sort of a Psy-Spam variant. It's the only Pokemon in the game that gets Expanding Force at the moment. What do you guys think about Armorogue?
So it's a grass type. That says it's a fire psychic type, but it really just is a grass type. You get to be a flash fire grass type, which is just excellent defensively. Has a ton of great resists, and yeah, it has 2 good offensive stabs.
It's also a good trick room setter. There's not too many trick room setters. It's gonna be interesting because now, like, the bigger question is because, like Neil said, it's a grass type pretty much, but people like it shut down like Torkoal Amoonguss under trick room a lot of the times as well. But now, how good is Torkoal going to be used when we don't have those photosynthesis Pokemon? I think that's a general question. I want whether in general, are we going to see more Pelipper now too?
That's
the general question for everybody about whether how do they see T-Tar, Torkoal, and Pelipper?
That's a really good question, because Torkoal, of course, everyone on their like day -10 tier lists had Torkoal Lilligant as a huge threat, and I think that it certainly fell off. It wasn't as big a deal, especially in a format that really was dominated by priority moves. Having chlorophyll wasn't as big a deal, but we started to see some teams sort of adapt and focus more on abusing not only things like Lilligant, but also or chlorophyll users, but also photosynthesis users. Now we don't have photosynthesis users. Do you think some teams can adapt in this metagame?
I think it's definitely still something you're gonna have to respect when you're building. Like, you're gonna need a way to not get put to sleep by Lilligant and then just get after you Eruption and the game's over in a couple turns. But as long as you're capable of checking it, like, for example, Armarouge, for example, like grass, flash, fire, great. You can't be sleep powdered. You're immune to fire moves. You resist the grass moves. You're probably good to go. But it's not as strong as it was before, but it's still something you have to respect, is my general takeaway.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I guess are there any other chlorophyll mons? I'm not sure. There's Jumpluff. That's a fun one. I know Gavin is excited to use Jumpluff always.
Mobility.
There's there's Scovillain. That's fun. The rest of these are not Pokemon. I'm sorry. It's just Lilligant and Jumpluff and Scovillain. And Scovillain is pushing it.
Scovillain is not pushing it. Scovillain, first ever chlorophyll fire type. So it gets a sun boost from like on its stab move,
Yeah.
and also
It gets Rage Powder too, right?
It sure does.
like this is the same shtick that every Swift Swim Rainmon was doing for the past like 15 years or so, and now Sun gets to like go fast and hit hard at the same time. It doesn't get Heat Wave, which probably would have pushed it over the top, and notably the Pokedex for these games does not include a single Pokemon that gets Chlorophyll, Heat Wave, or Muddy Water Swift Swim. And the Surf users are just very limited. It's Golduck, and nothing else has a good special attack set. But yeah, Scovillain drops really fast, really hard-hitting overheats, or Fire Blasts, or whatever your move of choice is.
Yep. So Scovillain may be relevant. We'll see. I'm still a little skeptical, but I guess if you can consistently set up Sun, it's going to be really good. I do think that we're going to see more of Tyranitar as another Pokemon that is just stuffed with base stats, 600 base stat total. Sandstream boosts his special defense stat. It's going to be really powerful, even maybe not on a sand dedicated team. Historically, we haven't seen a ton of sand teams using Sandstorm. Even in like VGC 2020, we saw Tyranitar and Excadrill on the same team, and the Excadrill was almost always Mold Breaker, which is really funny. So Sandstream really just boosting itself. That being said, any Pokemon can Terrastallize into a Rock type and benefit from the special defense boosting ability of Sandstorm if it really wants that, and if it can use that defensively. So Tyranitar might see more use, especially using that. And then, of course, Tyranitar itself can always Terrastallize into like a Ghost type and avoid those powerful fighting moves that it really wants to not take. So Tyranitar, we talked about Pelipper a little bit, or at least Rain a little bit. I don't think Rain as a pure strategy is going to be extremely good, at least with Swift Swim users. Although we have seen potentially other water types, like Taurus, I guess, is a cool one. Azumarill is a cool one. And Palafin is a Pokemon. Well, Dondozo, of course, but Palafin is another one that now maybe in a slower format is not going to get overpowered as much. It is a very passive team inherently because you do have to lead it, switch it out where it's not doing very much damage, and then bring it back in before you really start getting aggressive with it. So you are giving up a lot of turns, but now that the damage that the opposing team might exert is a little lower, you might be able to get away with that a little more. So we might see a little more Palafin as well as a water abuser, and that could also be an abuser on a Rain team because Jet Punch is a crazy move.
I was just gonna bring in a new thing, like where I was just looking through Pokemon, and I was thinking maybe now Salamence has a usage because there's limited Intimidate users, and now with like things like Flutter Mane gone, 100 speed stat is relevant again,
Right.
and Intimidate is relevant. So I don't know if Salamence has a place now because usually it was just basically Gyarados or Arcanine that people were throwing on teams, which I still think they're gonna be the top two, no matter what. But now maybe Salamence can squeeze in there.
Yeah, it still has the crazy base stat total. It's still doing a lot of damage, so would not shock me to see Salamence see a bunch of play as well. And then the last Pokemon that I want to bring up that you mentioned a little bit, Arcel, was Abomasnow, because it does have the not new ability, but Hail has been replaced by Snow, which means it gets a defense boost, and it is never been as inherently powerful as Tyranitar, but now it has a similar effect in that it boosts its own defense stat, which was otherwise kind of lacking.
Yeah, and you could see like it also gets access to Aurora Veil, so instead of so you can be also offensive with Abomasnow, but also increase the defenses of your whole team with Terra typing and everything. I wonder if like things like weakness policy Abomasnow might be kind of interesting, to be honest, because you can take advantage of the defense boost. You could probably take a hit now, and you could get really strong blizzards off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could definitely see this being, again, we talked about how dragon types are going to be more common, so Abomasnow potentially has its niche as a blizzard abuser as well. Then, do we even have any Slush Rush users? I don't think so.
Yeah, we have Satitan, we have Beartick.
Yeah, it's Titan and Beartick. Beartick's also one of the only Swift Swim mons.
I think Beartick might actually be better as a Swift Swim Pokemon. Um,
Yeah,
where Titan,
quite possibly.
I believe this thing. I actually have not looked into this very much, but I believe it's a belly drum user, right? That's what its niche is.
Yeah, it belly drums, and then it like earthquakes.
It's got Ice Shard. That's something.
Yeah.
Like a
Oh,
mini.
yeah,
Zoom
it can
out.
ice shard. It can ice spinner to clear out psychic turn, and then ice shard, and it does Amoonguss type things, while being very very fast.
Yeah. Um,
If you have a bomb spin.
if you have a Bomb Snow, and its defense, of course, is boosted. Its defense, well, its stats in general are quite low, except for its HP stat. So, I guess the defense boost is going to be helpful, but the attack stat is actually pretty high up there for a belly drum user.
Its speed stat is more than acceptable for a slush shot.
Yeah, absolutely. And so those were all the Pokemon that I had in mind that I wanted to talk about. Is there any other Pokemon that any of you guys wanted to talk about before we wrap this video up?
I guess on the topic of belly drum users, since we just brought it up, what do we think of Azu now that the format's less, it runs less of a risk of getting overpowered before you could get your belly drum up?
It doesn't love dealing with Amoonguss because Spore and Clear Smog both kind of shut it down. But if you can get over that hurdle, it should be okay.
It does get Ice Spinner now, so it does get to like kind of nuke the Amoonguss if you get a belly drum off first. But it is harder to do that, of course, in a format where Amoonguss is sort of omnipresent.
I think it can also use sets outside of belly drum, right? Because it has really good coverage. It's got, liquidation now. It's got play rough. It's got ice spinner. You can do a lot of stuff on it besides just like belly drum aqua jet.
Yeah, absolutely. It does have fairy water coverage is really good with ice as a flex spot, and then Aqua Jet. Yeah, I could definitely see any of these four moves being used, or potentially all four being used on like a choice band set, for example.
Yeah. It also has a very niche one where you can forego huge power and go Sap Sipper Perish Song for those kind of niche teams. Since there's very few Perish Song users in the format now, because like we said, we lost Screamtail and Fluttermane.
You
So
sure?
if you
And
get to-
that does give you another Spore immunity on a team, so it's not like invalid or anything. It's somewhat plausible. It's still not going to be on any teams except for fully dedicated parish, but
Right.
it can pull its weight there.
All right, and my box on Pokemon Showdown is now full, so I think that means we have to wrap up this video. But thank you for sticking around and listening to us talk about what we expect to see in this upcoming format. Let us know what Pokemon you expect to see or what you are really excited to use in the comments down below. And of course, make sure to like and subscribe. And thank you all for participating. This was hopefully a really educational video. I had a good time recording it. And until next time, I will see you all later.